Good morning and welcome to another Seize the Day. Trust you guys are waking up and feeling refreshed and ready to begin a new day. Um, Today is Tuesday, September the 5th, and we have another opportunity to just be together and open up the scriptures. It's a beautiful day out. It seems like we closing our summer months out with a string of really nice days. Hope you guys had a great Memorial Day weekend. Um, since we last spoke, I did a wedding in Lake Bomoseen in near Rutland, Vermont. It's about a 3-hour ride from where we're living here in New Hampshire, and it was a beautiful, beautiful day. Not too hot, and the interesting thing was you had to take a pontoon from the lodge, and they brought you out to this island, and we did the wedding out on an island. And funny thing was, they brought about um, I would say maybe about 70, 75 people, and but there's not one bathroom on the entire island. So it was so funny to hear all of the um, attendants there for the lodge, making sure that every woman understood and the guys that there was no bathrooms on the island. So it was really just something to look around and enjoy the view, and then get back on the boat and come back to shore for the rest of the festivities. But it was really a great day to be had by all. And yesterday I had an opportunity to speak over in Kittery Point. So it was great to get over to Kittery and see many of the people who are worshiping in our campus there. So today, this is going to be the last week that we're going to be looking at the Gospel of Matthew. We have been in this book now for just about a good year, and I hope that the study has been enriching for you. I learned a ton doing it, and I hope that maybe that gets passed along. The end of this book is really kind of interesting. And yesterday, when I was at Kittery, um, one of the congregants came up to me afterwards and shared that she thought that this was a really good way to present good news. And and she made a comment about a couple of things that we said, and it got me to thinking that what I shared in Kittery, I had shared in the other campuses, but because of our round robin kind of format in the summer, every campus goes live, and so I thought I'd close the week out by taking a very specific look at Matthew, but also from the lens of how do we how do we do this? How do we share good news? And so I thought what would be great is if we just sat back for a moment, and I just wanted you to think of many of the ways in which Matthew has portrayed Jesus in this book, from a genealogy that was given so that you might understand something about the heritage that Jesus came from, and that was all important because of promises that were made that God would keep, covenants that God made with, for instance, Abraham and with David, right, with his covenant people Israel, and all of those promises as they begin to play themselves out in the life of Jesus. And then um, we begin to see Jesus in his public ministry. Well, first he's tested, right, and he comes through with flying colors. Um, by the way, um, beginning on Sunday, we're going to begin a whole new series on the book of Deuteronomy. And what made me think of that is when Jesus is in that temptation in the wilderness, and the devil comes and tests him 3 different times. Jesus's response is always, "It is written," and then he gives a quotation. All 3 of those quotations come from the book of Deuteronomy. Deuteronomy is one of the most quoted books in the New Testament. And so I think it has a lot to teach us. And so we're going to begin a study in the book of Deuteronomy beginning next week. So I'll do my first sermon on Sunday, and then we'll pick up a number of themes after that. So I hope you will tune in for that, and we'll learn from this Old Testament book. But following that temptation, where Jesus did what Adam and Eve did not do, Jesus demonstrates a fidelity to his Father and to his Word, and so he begins this public ministry as is being indicated that he is this Messiah, right? He is the chosen one of God, and the result of that is Jesus begins to speak with a sense of authority, and that authority is captured by those who come to hear him, and their exclamation at the end of chapter 7 is that none of their teachers have spoken to them with such authority. Well, then we got into all the miracles that Jesus performed, and those miracles now demonstrated his lordship over all of creation. And as a result, Jesus did things that just astounded everyone, giving sight to the blind. The deaf could hear, the lame could walk. Jesus demonstrating power over creation by walking on water and stilling the wind and the waves. Or how about feeding 5,000 from 5 loaves and 2 fish? Yeah, this was way beyond anything that anyone had ever seen before. And all of which is pointing not just to, the supernatural, but all these things were done so that you and I might come to the conclusion that Jesus truly is the Messiah that was promised. And if he is that Messiah, then he is able to accomplish all the things that he is saying. So it gives you a level of confidence in the Word of God and in the Son of God, that he will do everything that he promised on our behalf. So we come to this passage then in Matthew 28, 16 through 20, where Jesus tells his disciples to come and meet him on this mountain. And as they come, it says they worshiped and doubted, right? Some doubted. No doubt, thinking about what was coming in the future. There's a lot of hesitancy there. But we also discover that Jesus then begins with the emphasis on the authority that he now possesses. He says, all authority in heaven and on earth has been given unto me. And so that declaration of authority and power is something that we've looked at and saw that Jesus now begins implicitly to say to the disciples, this authority is now I am giving to you to go out and do this work. They are to go out and share this good news of the kingdom of heaven, what Jesus has been spending his whole ministry talking about, giving people insight into this life that is yet to come, to make certain that we order our days in the present with that view of what is coming. And so this idea then of making disciples is the active verb in this whole passage. The making of disciples then is followed by 3 participles: going, baptizing, and teaching. And so I thought that I would just take a step back and share with you what I did on the weekend regarding this work that Jesus himself has been engaged in. And to do that, what I'd like to do is just start with you thinking with me on this whole topic of creation. And so let's just begin by imagining the world as we know it. Right now, there are marks all around us of its brokenness. Yesterday I came home and later in the day I started to mow my lawn, and there were leaves all over, and I'm thinking to myself, oh boy, it's just starting now. All these beautiful trees, they're going to lose their leaves. It's going to be a lot of work collecting all these leaves up again. But those leaves, right? They show, a change of season. That those leaves that were once green and vibrant are now dead, and they fall to the ground. I had a friend in Oregon when he first heard that I was coming to New Hampshire. He said, "Isn't that the place where they have those dead leaf tours?" And I'm like, "Well, some people would say fall foliage, but dead leaf tour, I guess that qualifies." I think the season this year is going to be rather impressive with all the rain that we had, but we'll see. But yesterday, all those leaves were already starting to show up on on my lawn, and I'm thinking, "Oh boy, it's coming." But you see, we live with these changes all around us. We see them within our own bodies, don't we? You know, there are marks that are in the world that just remind us that everything is not well. That there is this this um, this unity within creation itself, and so I want you to go back though to the beginning of this creation when everything was perfect. That God created it all, and and in this creation we begin to recognize, God's handiwork. He begins by separating the the light from the darkness. He 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 creates environments like the skies and the land and the sea, and then he populates them with animals appropriate to the environment. Birds fly, fish swim, and the beasts of the field, you know, um, roam upon it. And he looked at all that he had made and he said it was good. And then he created man. Only this time he says he creates man in his image. And in that image, we are now given responsibility and authority. You and I are brought into the world, and we are told to subdue the earth, to rule over it, to be fruitful and multiply. And so now, as this human species, we are placed in a position to be co-regents of this world that God had created. Think about that. God created the world. He could have created us like the beasts of the field, just to roam by instinct. But no, God created us in His image. We're thinking, we're creative, we're able to communicate with each other with language. We learn things and build things, and yeah, so set apart from all of the animals in this life. And God looked and said it was very good. There was a harmony that existed within the creation itself. There was nothing broken. And it says that God saw man, and he says this was very good. He adds the superlative to that. And then on the seventh day, he rests from all of his labor. And you would want to close the book at this point and think, wow, what a great story. Only our reality is not the same, is it? Because it is not long after we come to this place in our text that just extols the virtues of creation, that now we come and we recognize that creation, it leads to the fall. And in that fall, we see Jesus coming, right? Um, uh, in prophecies, it's told Adam and Eve, they rebel against God's declared purposes and His will, and it brings a change upon themselves, but it also brings a change into all of creation, right? Now, all of creation is subject to decay. Now there is this element of mortality that has been introduced into the world. No longer will we flourish, and the environment would cooperate. Now there are signs all around us, right, of disease and factions and divisions and wars and hate and jealousy and envy, right? It's all present. And the Bible gives us this indication that all of this happened as a result of this fall. Everything was now broken. Everything is marred. We go from this beautiful creation in Genesis 1 and 2 to being introduced to a fall. And now it says that Adam, he becomes the representative now of all the human races. So part of those who now follow in this line of Adam also receive this fallen nature. And try as we will to make all things perfect, yeah, it's difficult and unattainable on our own. This kind of redemption lies far beyond our abilities. And so from that fall and all that transpires because of that, God then begins to create another story, right? So it's about creation, as I listed down here for you. It's about the fall, but there's also this promise now that begins to surface of redemption. And so as we're telling this story, this good news that is shared, the good news of creation followed by the bad news of the fall, but now the hope that we find in this redemption. Because one of the most famous verses often quoted in the New Testament is John 3:16, where it says, God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son, that whoever believes in him should not perish, but have everlasting life. And so this text demonstrates that God's love for the world has not waned because of the fall. In fact, there are numerous places, beginning in the garden, where God makes this judgment, and he says that while the serpent seed, right, that this antagonist in the story, well, he's going to strike out at the seed of the woman, but that the seed of the woman will crush his head. This is found in Genesis chapter 3, when God brings them in and judges the serpent, judges Adam and Eve, and tells them by the sweat of their brow they are now going to work this land. In pain they will bear they will bear children. Everything is turned upside down. They are no longer, residents in this perfect garden, but now they are chased out, and you can just see the downward spiral that takes place, and it's not long before all kinds of murder and aggression and everything begins to rear its head. But in that setting, God is always bringing a witness. God is always providing revelation so that we might know him better. That's part of what you read about in the New Testament, is God's faithfulness to this covenant that he established with humanity. And so he did it through Adam and Eve, giving them children, and followed by Noah, right? Followed by Abraham, and then his children, Isaac and Jacob, and the 12 sons, and the nation of Israel, and on it goes. And in every generation, God demonstrating his faithfulness, and giving people insight into how they are to live, even in the midst of all of this brokenness, and always in the context of a promise that is coming of redemption, where God is going to redeem all that is broken and restore it again. And so this kind of redemption is what takes up all of the Old Testament. And there are beautiful verses in there, and some of which we have looked at, we in our studies we went through the book of Isaiah, and it's filled with all kinds of references to this coming king. Right? We have the uh, the the prophecy in Isaiah chapter 7, where it says that God is going to give a son, and you shall call him, you know, and you shall call him Emmanuel, God with us. And we see then in this New Testament that Jesus is the fulfillment of that promise. Or how about Isaiah 9, where he says, "Unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given, and the government shall be upon his shoulders. And he shall be called Wonderful, Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace." Yeah, this is Jesus who will be born. And that same Jesus will come, and he will give his life a ransom for the sins of men. And again, Isaiah 53, where it talks about, you know, how this this um, this Son of Man, right? This suffering servant is going to come, and it says, "By his wounds we will be healed." That the iniquity of us all will be laid on him. And after he has given his life, he will see his posterity. In other words, his life will begin anew, because on that tree he would die for your sins and mine. And what was shared in a form that allowed for people's imaginations to capture this hope of a redeemer, Jesus coming in the flesh, now gives a visible look at what all those promises were about. So you have this creation where all is perfect, the fall that comes and now it's marred, but God is not thwarted. He comes and he brings this level of redemption. And and so Jesus comes into the world, and he comes making this call that this redeemer is going to forgive men of their sins. They will be experiencing this redemption, right? But it's also going to be, and I'm typing this out for you here, there is going to come this restoration. And God knows that this day is coming. Our redemption was purchased on that cross, but the restoration that is going to come is when God will make all things new. 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 17, it teaches us that, right? It says, "The old has passed away, behold, all things are new." And that's the experience of all of those who have been redeemed by this Messiah, Jesus, who came and died for one's sins. And so you see in the work of Jesus, who comes and is a part of this creation, seeks to redeem the fallen and to restore all things back to what we once experienced in that garden with the Father. No more sin, no more suffering, no more pain, no more death. And this story then of 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 this hope that we have is exactly what Jesus began to do and began to share in his whole ministry that was among us. Everything that Jesus did was get people to recognize that God is sovereign over all things. He's the one who made everything out of nothing. That what we are experiencing now with all of the pain and sorrow comes as a result of men's fall. They're turning away from the things of God, no longer finding it fit to hold on to what his will and decrees are all about. And so God sends his son into the world to redeem it, to call men and women back from every nation, every tongue, every tribe, right? And didn't we see that in the work of Jesus, who would go to the rich, to the poor, to men, to women, to the sick, to the healthy, to the slave, to the free. Jesus went to all people, and everywhere he went, he shared the good news of this kingdom, a kingdom that God had prepared for his people. That entrance into that kingdom would come not because of works that we have done, but because of the invitation that's given to us by the Redeemer, Jesus. So all of these things now come to a head, and we see in the ministry of Jesus this constant call for restoration, to be to be to be born anew, right? To have your mind transformed by these teachings that God has given us. And and that's exactly what Jesus did in his ministry. Everywhere he went, were there not stories about what the kingdom of heaven would be like? Matthew, we saw, right, in chapter 13, one of the beautiful chapters in Matthew that gives us a whole, we're treated to all these stories that Jesus gives us about what the kingdom of heaven is like. The kingdom of heaven, like that sower who goes out and sows seed, and it falls on rocky soil, right? It falls on thorn bushes, it falls on hard ground, and some falls on good ground. And what we see in that story is the reality of the world in which we're living. This kingdom that is being promised, sometimes it falls on such hard ground that it never penetrates. And we know people like that, don't we? It says some, though, they are like that rocky soil. They accept the word with gladness. They love hearing about what this is about, but because they don't really grow deep roots because of the rocks that are present in that soil, instead of growing down, it grows up, and as it springs forth, it gives the illusion that, wow, this is so promising. But then they fall prey to the trouble that's in this life, to persecution, and because they have no root, they they produce no fruit, and the plant withers and dies. And the same for the thorn bushes. The thorns represent the worries of this life or the deceitfulness of riches. Either one can choke the very life out of a plant. And that's what happens in people's lives. They receive this word of God, but the worries of this life or the deceitfulness of the pleasures around them, it gets us off our game. And the next thing you know, we're thinking about other things and thinking about God less and less. And all the while, Jesus is telling people this story because he wants them to be able to hear and listen, to begin to follow, to begin to put into practice this good news of the kingdom of heaven. And it does fall on good soil as well. And you see, Jesus says, it's going to produce 100, 60, 30 times. It'll produce great fruit. I remember when we were studying those passages, um, listening to a farmer who said that, back in those days, if you got a tenfold harvest, it was something to put down in the record books. Jesus was talking about 30, 60, 100-fold. And so all of which then to say, again, that Jesus was not looking at the world and ignoring the pain and the suffering, but he entered right into it, calling us out, giving us a sense of hope that one day all this will be restored, and all of it based on the fact that Jesus would give his life a ransom for the sins of men, but be resurrected from the dead, and then a period of time would exist so that we can share this good news with others. Hence, this brings us all the way back to the Great Commission. And sharing this story of creation and the fall, of the promise of redemption and restoration. When you think of it this way, you realize this is a whole complete story that Jesus has unfolded for us in the person of his Son. Well, I hope that little overview helps you to be able to take this good news and share it with others. We're going to look a little bit closer at some of the ways in which that can be done as we close out our study in the Gospel of Matthew. But I hope that this look today at this story of salvation is one that leaves you thankful, but also remembering that we have a responsibility to go out into the world to share it. People need hope, especially in the days in which we're living. And that hope, it'll take us from this life into the one to come. My friends, thank you so much for being a part of our morning on this Tuesday, September the 5th. I hope you had a great, a great Labor Day. And as always, I hope that that you will remember again that God is good all the time. Seize the day, my friends. And Lord willing, we'll spend some more time again tomorrow. God bless.